The limestone walls of the Blackwood estate felt more like a tomb than a home to Arthur, the world's most reclusive and cynical billionaire. He sat in his custom titanium wheelchair, staring out of the floor-to-ceiling windows, his face a frozen mask of permanent, bitter glass. For 10 long years, not a single flicker of joy had crossed his features, effectively silencing the laughter that once echoed in the halls. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments what time is it and where are you watching from. Let's start. The staff moved like ghosts, terrified of the man who fired anyone who dared to make eye contact or speak without being spoken to. Arthur's paralysis was not just in his legs, it had settled deep in his soul, turning his vast wealth into a pile of cold, useless ash. Enter Elena, the new maid, who walked into the obsidian-tiled study with a quiet confidence that seemed to irritate the very air. She didn't bow her head or tremble when Arthur's cold, predatory gaze snapped toward her, demanding a submission she didn't offer. Instead of the usual mechanical efficiency, she moved with a grace that suggested she wasn't there to serve, but to observe him. Arthur gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles turning white, as he prepared to bark an order that would surely send her packing. The tension in the room thickened until it was suffocating, a silent battle of wills between the broken king and the mysterious newcomer. Arthur expected her to flinch when he threw his crystal glass across the room, but Elena simply watched it shatter without blinking an eye. She didn't rush to clean the shards. Instead, she walked to the record player and placed a needle onto a dusty, forgotten vinyl from his past. The billionaire's breath hitched as a melody from a decade ago filled the sterile room, a sound he had forbidden anyone from ever playing again. "Who gave you permission to touch that?" he hissed, his voice like grinding stones, yet Elena only offered a small, knowing tilt of her head. She ignored his rage and began to polish the silver trophies on the mantel, her movements rhythmic and entirely unbothered by his rising fury. Arthur found himself unable to look away, fascinated by a woman who treated his multi-billion-dollar shadow as if it were merely a drafty room. Day after day, she bypassed the expensive electronics and focused on the relics of the man he was before the accident stole his legs and heart. The power shift was subtle but undeniable. He was no longer the master of the house, but a captive audience to her silent, methodical rebellion. He realized she wasn't following the manual provided by the agency. She was following a map of his own life that he thought he had burned. By the end of the week, the silence wasn't heavy with fear anymore, but charged with a question Arthur was finally becoming too curious to ignore. Arthur watched from the shadows of the hallway as Elena entered his private vault, a place where no employee had stepped in over a decade. He expected to catch her stealing his gold or bonds, but instead he saw her carefully unfolding a weathered, handwritten letter from his desk. His heart hammered against his ribs as she traced the signature of his late brother, the one person he blamed for the crash that paralyzed him. Elena didn't look like a thief. She looked like a woman mourning a ghost, her fingers lingering on the ink with a heartbreaking, familiar tenderness. "Put it down," Arthur commanded, his voice trembling with a vulnerability he hadn't felt since the day the world turned upside down for him. She turned slowly, not with guilt, but with a gaze so piercing it felt as though she were reading the very secrets etched into his scarred marrow. "You've spent 10 years hating a dead man to keep from hating yourself," she whispered, her first words cutting deeper than any physical blade. Arthur recoiled as if struck, the realization dawning that this woman knew the intricate details of a tragedy he had paid millions to bury. The air in the room grew cold as he realized she hadn't found the vault by accident. She had been looking for this specific proof all along. The billionaire felt the walls of his carefully constructed reality begin to crumble, sensing that the maid was the only one who held the key. Arthur lunged forward in his chair, his eyes burning with a mix of fury and terror as he demanded to know her true identity at last. Elena didn't retreat. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a matching locket, the twin to the one Arthur wore hidden beneath his shirt. "My name isn't Elena," she said softly. "It's Sarah, the wife of the driver you let the world believe was drunk during that fatal night." The billionaire froze as the weight of a decade-long lie crashed down, the truth being that he was the one steering the wheel in his pride. He had paid the police and the press to frame her husband, preserving his own corporate image while destroying a family's entire reputation. Sarah hadn't come for his money or for a job. She had spent years tracking the paper trail to find the confession he wrote, but never sent. The regret hit him like a physical blow, a suffocating realization that his physical paralysis was a mercy compared to his moral decay. For the first time in 10 years, the mask of the cold billionaire shattered completely, leaving behind a man drowning in his own dark sins. He looked at her, expecting to see a weapon or a phone recording his downfall, but all he saw was a widow seeking the dignity of the truth. The room spun as Arthur realized the one thing she did wasn't a service of a maid, but the confrontation of a victim seeking a lost justice. Arthur's lips trembled as a jagged, broken sound escaped his throat, a laugh that dissolved into a sob, his first real emotion in a decade. He realized the irony. His wealth had bought him a decade of silence, but Sarah's courage had finally forced him to hear the truth. Tears carved tracks through the dust of his bitterness as he handed her the key to the safe containing the original, signed confession. "I can't give back the years," he whispered, his voice cracking, "but I can finally give the world back the man your husband truly was." By morning, the billionaire's legal team was instructed to release every document, effectively ending his career and his social standing forever. As the news broke, Arthur felt a strange lightness. The titanium chair no longer felt like a cage because his conscience was finally free. He watched Sarah walk down the long driveway of the estate, her head held high, carrying the justice she had hunted for 10 long years. For the first time since the accident, Arthur looked into the mirror and smiled, a haunting but genuine expression of a soul finally at peace. He chose to donate his entire fortune to the families of those wrongly accused, keeping only enough to live a simple, honest, and quiet life. The Blackwood tomb was finally empty, and as the sun rose, Arthur realized that true power isn't in control, but in the courage to be forgiven. Wealth can build a fortress to hide your sins, but only the truth has the power to set you free from the prison of your own mind. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes it's too late to make things right. Subscribe for more cinematic tales of mystery and redemption.